Standing in my wedding dress, I stared at the envelope my parents left on my childhood bed. My hands trembled as I read their cruel words. "Let's see how you face the guests when we won't be appearing at your wedding." They'd chosen a Paris trip with my brother Derek over my wedding day. What they didn't know was that in 2 hours I'd be marrying into one of America's wealthiest families, and their absence would become the most publicized family scandal in Chicago. The morning sunlight filtered through my childhood bedroom window as I stood frozen, reading those words again and again. It was 6 o'clock on what should have been the happiest morning of my life. I had arrived at my parents' house in Lincoln Park, just as we had planned months ago, ready to share those precious, getting-ready moments with my mother and sister-in-law. Instead, I found myself alone in an empty house that echoed with silence. My wedding dress hung on the closet door, its delicate lace catching the light. I had bought it myself, saving for months from my non-profit salary, after my mother declared that wedding expenses were the bride's responsibility in modern times. Strange how she never mentioned that rule when they paid for Derek's third business venture or his law school tuition. I walked down the hallway to my parents' bedroom, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Their bed was perfectly made, no signs of a hurried departure. Opening their closet, I saw gaps where their suitcases usually sat. My mother's jewelry box was gone from the dresser. This wasn't some last-minute emergency. This was planned. Back in my room, I emptied the envelope with shaking fingers. $50 in cash tumbled onto my childhood quilt, along with their note written in my mother's perfect penmanship. The words blurred through my tears as I read them one more time. "Let's see how you face the guests when we won't be appearing at your wedding." My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my maid of honor. "On my way, can't wait to help you get ready." I couldn't bring myself to reply. How could I tell her that my family had abandoned me on my wedding day? The memories flooded back uninvited. Every Christmas when Derek's presents formed a mountain while mine fit in a single pile. Every parent-teacher conference they missed for my achievements, but attended religiously for Derek's struggles. The way my mother's face lit up when Derek entered a room while I received polite smiles and distracted nods. I had accepted it all, telling myself that parents love differently, not less. But this was cruelty I never imagined. I heard a car door slam outside and looked through my window. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was retrieving her morning newspaper. She waved when she saw me, and something in her expression seemed odd, almost pitying. "Kathleen, dear," she called out when I opened the front door, "I have something you should see." She led me to her living room and pulled up her security camera footage on her tablet. "I couldn't sleep last night and noticed activity at your parents' house around 3 in the morning. I thought you should know." The black and white footage was crystal clear. There were my parents loading suitcases into their BMW while Derek supervised. But it was what happened next that shattered my heart completely. My father popped a bottle of champagne right there in the driveway. The three of them toasted and laughed, my mother actually doing a little dance of joy. Derek hugged them both, and I could read his lips saying, "Finally, a real vacation without the drama." They were celebrating their escape from my wedding. Sarah burst through the front door 20 minutes later, her arms full of makeup bags and hair supplies. She took one look at my tear-stained face and dropped everything. "What happened? Where is everyone?" She glanced around the empty house, her confusion growing. "Where are your parents? Your mom said she'd have mimosas ready." I handed her the note wordlessly. Sarah read it once, then twice, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally rage. "Those bastards," she whispered then louder, "those absolute bastards. How could they do this to you today of all days?" "They're in Paris," I said numbly, "with Derek. They left at 3 this morning. Mrs. Chen has security footage of them celebrating in the driveway with champagne." Sarah pulled me into a fierce hug. "You know what, screw them. You don't need them. You have Marcus, you have his family, you have me. We're your real family." At the mention of Marcus, fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. Sweet, wonderful Marcus, who had no idea my family had just abandoned our wedding. Marcus, who my parents had dismissed and mocked for the past 2 years, never knowing the truth about who he really was. "I need to tell you something," I said to Sarah, pulling back to look at her. "About Marcus, about why this is going to be even worse than my parents think." Sarah's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Remember how I told you I met Marcus when I was volunteering at the literacy center?" I began sitting down on my childhood bed. "What I didn't tell you was that he was there for the Montgomery Foundation's annual review. Sarah, Marcus isn't just an architect. He's Marcus Montgomery, as in Montgomery Industries, Montgomery Foundation. Montgomery everything." Sarah's mouth fell open. "Wait, the billionaire Montgomerys, the ones who own half of Chicago." I nodded miserably. "He begged me not to tell anyone when we started dating. He wanted to find someone who loved him for him, not his money. So he drives that old Honda Civic, lives in that modest apartment in Wicker Park, tells everyone he's just a regular architect at a small firm. But he actually owns the firm." Sarah finished putting the pieces together. "He owns the entire building," I corrected, "and 12 others like it across the city, but my parents. They spent 2 years mocking him. Remember last Thanksgiving when my mother asked if he could even afford to buy me a decent ring? Or when my father pulled me aside to say I should think practically about my future and maybe date someone more ambitious?" Sarah groaned. "And Derek calling him Marcus the Mediocre at every family dinner. Oh my God, Kathleen, when they find out." "They won't be here to find out," I said bitterly. "They made their choice." Just then my phone rang, Marcus's sister Charlotte. "Kathleen, darling, just confirming we'll see you at the venue. Mother has something special for you and grandmother is beside herself with excitement. She hasn't attended a family wedding in 5 years. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. "Kathleen, is everything all right?" "Charlotte, my parents, they're not coming." There was a pause. "What do you mean they're not coming? Are they ill?" "They went to Paris with my brother. They left a note saying they won't be at the wedding." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Charlotte's voice came back, steel wrapped in silk. "I see. Well, that's their loss, isn't it? You have us now. We're your family. I'll see you at the venue and don't you worry about a thing. The Montgomerys take care of our own." After she hung up, Sarah was staring at me. "Did she just say grandmother, as in Eleanor Montgomery? The woman who single-handedly built the Montgomery Foundation into the largest charitable organization in the Midwest?" I nodded weakly. "She's 90 years old and hasn't left her estate for anything in 5 years, but she's coming to my wedding." "The wedding your parents just ditched for a trip to Paris," Sarah said slowly. "Do they have any idea what they've done?" A text popped up on my phone from an unknown number. It was my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister. "Just heard from your mom that they're in Paris, so jealous. Don't worry, I'm sure your little wedding will be fine without them. Not like it's a big affair anyway, right?" Sarah read it over my shoulder and snatched my phone. "Oh, that's it. Those people have no idea what kind of little wedding they're missing. Come on, we're doing your makeup and hair and you're going to be the most beautiful bride Chicago has ever seen. Let them enjoy Paris. You're about to become American royalty and they just gave up their front row seats." As Sarah worked on my hair, she suddenly paused. "Kathleen, there's something else. Last week, when I was at your parents' house dropping off the corsages, I overheard your mother on the phone. She was telling someone that you were marrying down and that they were too embarrassed to attend. She actually said, 'Why should we waste a Saturday watching Kathleen make another poor life choice?' The words hit me like physical blows. My own mother too embarrassed to attend my wedding. Too embarrassed of me. By 8 o'clock, the hair and makeup team Marcus had hired arrived at my parents' house, transforming the living room into a makeshift salon. Sarah had called them to redirect from the hotel suite my parents were supposed to have booked. The team lead, an elegant woman named Monique, took one look at my puffy eyes and got to work without asking questions. "You're going to be radiant," she assured me, her French accent soothing. Mr. Montgomery specifically requested we make you look like the goddess you are. As they worked their magic, my phone buzzed constantly with texts from relatives and friends asking where my parents were. The wedding coordinator, Jennifer, called 3 times about the processional order. "I don't understand," Jennifer said on her 4th call, stress evident in her voice. "Your parents are listed as part of the processional. Your father is supposed to walk you down the aisle. The musicians need to know timing." "They won't be there," I managed to say. "Family emergency." "Oh no, should we postpone?" Mr. Montgomery was very specific about everything being perfect for you. "No," I said firmly. "The wedding goes on, just adjust the processional." An hour later, a convoy of luxury cars pulled up outside. Through the window, I watched Eleanor Montgomery step out of a Bentley assisted by her driver. At 85, she moved with the bearing of a queen. Charlotte emerged from another car, her judge's robes traded for an elegant navy dress. Marcus's father, Richard, helped his wife, Grace, from their car. They swept into my parents' house like a force of nature. Eleanor took one look around the empty home, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Where are your parents, dear child?" she asked directly. I couldn't lie to those penetrating eyes. "They went to Paris with my brother. They chose not to attend." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard Montgomery's face darkened while Grace pressed her lips together, but it was Eleanor who spoke. "Their loss," she said crisply. "Charlotte, you'll walk Kathleen down the aisle. Richard called James and have him redirect the photographer to give us more preparation shots here. This is Kathleen's childhood home. Yes, we should document it properly." Charlotte took my hands. "I would be honored to walk you down the aisle. Federal judge escorting the bride, that'll make the society pages." "I couldn't ask you to do that," I protested weakly. "You're not asking. You're family now. We don't abandon family." Grace Montgomery opened a velvet box she'd been carrying. "I was going to give this to you at the reception, but I think now is better." Inside lay a stunning diamond necklace. This was given to me by Eleanor on my wedding day. It's tradition for Montgomery brides to wear it. My hands shook as she clasped it around my neck. I don't know what to say. "Say you'll make my son happy," she said simply. "That's all we've ever wanted." Jennifer called again near hysteria. "The guests are starting to arrive and there's an entire section reserved for the bride's family. What should I do?" Richard took my phone. "Jennifer, Richard Montgomery, move the strings quartet to the bride's family section. Have them play throughout the ceremony. Problem solved." He handed back my phone with a wink. "I've handled bigger crises in boardrooms. A wedding is child's play." Eleanor was examining family photos on the mantel, her expression thoughtful. "Is this you?" She pointed to a family portrait where I stood slightly apart from my parents and Derek, all of them angled toward each other while I faced forward alone. "Yes, from 5 years ago." She said nothing more, but her hand briefly touched my shoulder. Charlotte's phone rang. She listened for a moment, then her eyes widened. "Father, you need to hear this." She put it on speaker. Marcus's assistant, Oliver, was on the line. "Mr. Montgomery, I thought you should know. The Whitmore Paris Hotel called about a booking issue. Apparently a family named Sullivan checked in this morning, but their credit card was declined for incidentals. The name caught my attention since that's Miss Kathleen's family name. Should I look into it?" Richard's smile was sharp. "The Whitmore. How interesting. That's one of ours, isn't it?" "Yes, sir. Part of the European portfolio you acquired last year." "I see. Thank you, Oliver. No action needed for now." After he hung up, Richard turned to me. "Your parents are staying at one of our hotels. They have no idea, do they?" I shook my head, mortified. "They love that hotel. They brag about staying there." "Well," Eleanor said with a sniff, "they're about to learn what it means to cross the Montgomery family, though I suspect their education is just beginning." The ride to the venue was surreal. I sat in the back of the Bentley with Charlotte and Eleanor watching Chicago pass by through tinted windows. The small Presbyterian church where Marcus and I had planned our modest ceremony looked different somehow, transforming before my eyes. "Why are there so many cars?" I asked, noticing the parking lot was overflowing. Charlotte checked her phone. Marcus might have invited a few extra people when he heard about your parents. He wanted to make sure you felt surrounded by love. But it was more than a few extra people. As we pulled up to the church, I saw news vans, actual news vans with satellite dishes and reporters standing ready. "What's happening?" I gasped. Eleanor patted my hand. "You're marrying a Montgomery dear. When the heir to the Montgomery fortune gets married, it's news. We tried to keep it quiet per Marcus's wishes, but someone must have leaked it this morning." My simple wedding was becoming a media circus. The wedding coordinator rushed to our car, now flanked by security guards I didn't recognize. "Change of plans," Jennifer said breathlessly. "We're using the private entrance. Mr. Montgomery's orders." Inside the bridal suite, my cousin Jessica was waiting with her teenage daughter, Emma. They both looked stunned. "Kathleen, what is happening? There are photographers everywhere, and did I just see Senator Williams?" Before I could answer, Charlotte stepped forward. "Yes, the senator is a family friend. Now, if you'll excuse us, the bride needs to finish preparing." But Jessica wasn't done. "Mom said Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert went to Paris today. How could they miss this?" She gestured vaguely at the chaos outside. "They made their choice," Eleanor said coolly. "Now are you here to support Kathleen or to gossip because we only have room for the former?" Jessica nodded quickly, properly chastised by the Montgomery matriarch. Emma, meanwhile, was staring at my necklace with wide eyes. "Is that real?" she whispered. "Everything about today is real," Charlotte said, "including the love between Marcus and Kathleen. That's what matters." Grace was on her phone, speaking rapidly. "Yes, the full team. I don't care if it's Saturday. The Montgomery wedding is proceeding, and I want our PR people here now." Through the window, I could see more guests arriving. A former governor stepped out of a town car. The CEO of Chicago's largest bank walked past with his wife. My work colleagues from the Literacy Center stood in a cluster looking overwhelmed. "I need to warn them," I said. "My friends, my coworkers, they don't know about Marcus. They think they're coming to a small wedding." "They're coming to your wedding," Eleanor corrected. "The size is irrelevant. The love is what matters." Sarah burst in, having parked the car. "Okay, you are not going to believe what just happened. I just saw 3 Bentleys, 2 Rolls Royces, and a literal motorcade pull up. There's a red carpet being rolled out. A red carpet, Kathleen." "Where's Marcus?" I asked, suddenly needing to hear his voice. "Already at the altar," Charlotte said. "He wanted me to give you this." She handed me a letter in Marcus's handwriting. "My darling Kathleen, I heard about your parents. I'm sorry they're missing the chance to see how loved you are, but today isn't about them. It's about us and the life we're building. Walk down that aisle knowing you're surrounded by people who choose to be here, who choose you. All my love, Marcus." Tears threatened my carefully applied makeup. Monique appeared as if by magic with tissues and powder. "No crying yet," she said. "Save it for the vows." A knock at the door interrupted us. Jennifer entered, looking frazzled. "The officiant has arrived. Judge Morrison sends his regards and wants to know if you need anything special mentioned during the ceremony." "Judge Morrison," I repeated weakly. "Federal Circuit Court Judge Morrison." "Supreme Court Justice Morrison," Eleanor corrected. "Retired, of course. He's been a family friend for 40 years. Marcus thought you'd appreciate having someone special officiate." My simple wedding with a local pastor had transformed into an event officiated by a Supreme Court justice. Through the walls, I could hear the string quartet warming up the murmur of hundreds of guests, the click of cameras. 2 minutes, Jennifer announced. Charlotte stood and offered me her arm, ready to become a Montgomery. I thought about my parents probably sipping champagne in Paris, convinced they'd ruined my day. They had no idea that their absence had triggered an outpouring of support from Chicago's most powerful family. No idea that their embarrassing daughter was about to have the wedding of the century. "I'm ready," I said, standing tall. As we walked toward the door, my phone lit up with a notification. Aunt Patricia had posted on social media, "At Kathleen's wedding, You won't believe who just walked in." Eleanor glanced at the phone and smiled. "Oh, my dear, they have no idea what they're missing. No idea at all." The music swelled, the doors opened, and I stepped into a transformed world. The sanctuary took my breath away. What should have been our simple ceremony with 75 guests had exploded into something from a fairy tale. Every pew overflowed with people. The walls were draped in white orchids and roses that hadn't been there during yesterday's rehearsal, and photographers lined the sides like sentinels. As Charlotte and I began our walk down the aisle, I saw faces I recognized from newspaper headlines and television. The mayor sat in the third row. The president of Northwestern University nodded warmly from across the aisle. But it was Marcus's face that anchored me, his eyes full of love and just a hint of mischief. He looked devastating in his custom tuxedo, flanked by his groomsmen, including his best friend James, who I now realized was James Chen, the tech mogul, who'd just taken his company public for $2 billion. The buddy from college Marcus played basketball with on weekends was one of the richest men in America. Justice Morrison stood at the altar with the gravitas of someone who'd spent decades on the nation's highest court. As Charlotte placed my hand in Marcus's, she whispered, "Welcome to the family, sister." The ceremony itself was a blur of beautiful words and promises. Marcus had written his own vows, speaking of finding his soulmate in a literacy center, of falling in love with my kindness, my strength, my refusal to be impressed by material things. "You saw me," he said, his voice carrying through the sanctuary, when everyone else saw only a name or a bank account. "You loved Marcus, not Montgomery. Today, I give you both." When Justice Morrison pronounced us husband and wife, the church erupted in applause that seemed to shake the ancient rafters. As we kissed, I heard the whir of professional cameras and saw phone screens lighting up throughout the congregation. But nothing prepared me for our exit. The modest church steps had been transformed with a white carpet lined with roses. At the bottom waited not the simple town car we'd hired, but a line of white Bentleys adorned with ribbons and flowers. Security guards held back what looked like half of Chicago's media outlets. "Mr. Montgomery, a word about your wedding." "Mrs. Montgomery, how does it feel to join one of America's most prominent families?" "Is it true the president sent congratulations?" Marcus shielded me as we descended, but he was grinning. "I might have let it slip to a few people that I was getting married today," he said in my ear. "Hope you don't mind." The reception venue nearly gave me a heart attack. Our simple hotel ballroom booking had been changed last minute to the exclusive Skyline Club with its panoramic views of Chicago and membership list that read like Forbes 500. "When did you do this?" I asked Marcus as we entered to applause from 300 guests. "This morning when Charlotte called about your parents. I wanted today to be perfect for you. No one puts my wife in a corner." The reception was like walking through a dream. Every detail was elevated beyond our modest plans. The three-piece band we'd hired had become the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's jazz ensemble. Our buffet dinner was now a 7-course meal prepared by a Michelin-starred chef. The simple cake I'd ordered from a local bakery had been replaced by a 6-tier masterpiece that belonged in a magazine. My work colleagues from the Literacy Center sat at a table looking shell-shocked. My supervisor Janet grabbed my hand as I passed. "Kathleen, we had no idea. Marcus Montgomery, the Marcus Montgomery. He's been volunteering with us for 2 years. He likes to keep a low profile," I said, squeezing her hand. "He's still the same Marcus who reads to the kids every Thursday." My cousin Jessica intercepted me near the dance floor, her phone clutched in her hand. "Kathleen, you need to see this. Aunt Linda just posted from Paris." The photo showed my parents at a cafe raising champagne glasses. The caption read, "Perfect morning in Paris with our favorite son, some things are worth missing." The wink emoji felt like a slap, but before I could react, Charlotte appeared at my elbow. "Don't give them the power to ruin this moment," she said quietly. "Look around you. Look at all these people who chose to celebrate with you." She was right. Everywhere I looked, I saw joy. Marcus's grandmother was holding court at her table, regaling senators and CEOs with stories. Grace Montgomery was dancing with my elderly great-aunt Mabel, who'd driven in from Iowa. Even my perpetually grumpy Uncle Stan was laughing at something Richard Montgomery had said. "Ladies and gentlemen," the band leader announced, "I've just been informed that our newlyweds' first dance will be covered by Chicago Tribune's Society page. So let's give them a show, yeah." As Marcus led me onto the dance floor, I whispered, "The Tribune." "And the Sun-Times, and Chicago Magazine, possibly Vogue, but that's just a rumor." He spun me gracefully as cameras flashed. "Still think your parents' absence ruined the wedding." Halfway through dinner, my phone started buzzing insistently. Sarah, sitting beside me as maid of honor, glanced at the screen. "You need to see this," she said, her eyes huge. She showed me Aunt Patricia's Instagram. The photos were everywhere. Our ceremony, the reception, the famous guests. But it was the video that had gone viral. Someone had captured Marcus's vows, and the clip had already been shared thousands of times. The comments were pouring in. "Is this the Montgomery wedding? Wait, I thought this was a small family ceremony? Where are the bride's parents?" That last comment had hundreds of replies, and I made the mistake of reading them. People had noticed the empty seats, the Montgomery family filling both sides of the aisle, Charlotte walking me down instead of my father. "Don't," Marcus said gently, taking my phone. "Today is about us, not them." But the universe had other plans. A local news crew had set up outside, and through the windows, we could see the reporter going live. "We're here at the Skyline Club, where Chicago's wedding of the century is taking place. Marcus Montgomery, heir to the Montgomery fortune, has married Kathleen Sullivan in a ceremony attended by everyone from Supreme Court justices to tech billionaires, notably absent the bride's parents, who sources say are vacationing in Paris." The whispers started at the tables nearest the windows. I felt my cheeks burn as guests began putting pieces together. The empty seats, the Montgomery family's protective, hovering the last-minute venue changes. Then Eleanor Montgomery stood up, tapping her champagne glass. The room fell silent. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, her voice carrying to every corner. "To my new granddaughter, Kathleen. In my 90 years, I've learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by choice. Today, Kathleen chose Marcus, and we choose her. To the bride, who has shown us all what grace under pressure truly means." The room erupted in applause and cheers. People stood raising their glasses, and I had to bite my lip to keep from sobbing. This woman, American royalty in her own right, had just publicly claimed me as family in front of Chicago's elite. Forbes magazine's Society reporter approached our table between courses. "Mrs. Montgomery, just a few questions for our feature." I was about to decline when Marcus nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, sweetheart, tell them our story." So I did. I told them about meeting at the literacy center, about falling in love with a man who quoted poetry while teaching kids to read about building a relationship based on shared values rather than bank accounts. I didn't mention my parents once, but the reporter did. "There's speculation about your parents' absence. Care to comment?" "Today is about celebrating love and the family we choose," I said, channeling Charlotte's earlier wisdom. "I'm surrounded by all the family I need." The reporter seemed satisfied, but I noticed him typing furiously on his phone as he walked away. Whatever story was brewing, it was already beyond my control. While I danced with my new father-in-law in Chicago, my parents were sitting down to a late dinner at their hotel restaurant in Paris. The Whitmore Hotel's dining room was exactly the kind of place my mother loved to brag about, with its crystal chandeliers and gold-leafed ceiling. According to Derek, who would later drunkenly confess the whole story to a bartender in Paris, who happened to be American and very interested in the tale, my mother was taking photos of every course to post on social media. "Linda, look," my father said, pointing to the large screen television over the bar. "Is that Chicago on the news?" The volume was muted, but the images needed no sound. There was the Skyline Club lit up like a jewel against the night sky. There were helicopters circling overhead, their searchlights creating patterns on the building. The headline scrolled across the bottom in multiple languages, but the English was clear: Montgomery Air Weds in Chicago Society Event of the Year. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. That building, Robert doesn't, Kathleen's little reception hall looked different on TV. Then the camera cut to footage from earlier. There was Marcus helping me from the Bentley, looking like a movie star in his tuxedo. There was the red carpet, the photographers, the security detail. And there, unmistakably, was me in my wedding dress, wearing what even on the grainy hotel TV was clearly a fortune in diamonds. The fork clattered to my mother's plate. "Derek," she whispered. What did that caption say? Did it say, Montgomery? Derek, who had been posting his own smug updates about escaping family obligations for the City of Light, looked up from his phone. His face went white as he processed what he was seeing. The screen now showed a split image. On one side, a professional photo of Marcus from some charity gala. On the other, a candid shot of us from the reception dancing while surrounded by people Derek recognized, even from across an ocean. "Is that the mayor?" he choked out, and Judge Chen from the federal court. The French waiter approached with their wine selection, but my father waved him away, frantically pointing at the screen. "Turn it up, the volume s'il vous plaît." What they heard in the cultured tones of a BBC international correspondent changed everything. The surprise wedding of Marcus Montgomery, heir to a $3 billion fortune, has taken Chicago by storm this evening. The private ceremony became a public sensation when news leaked that the 32-year-old philanthropist had been secretly dating Kathleen Sullivan, a literacy advocate for the past 2 years. Sources close to the couple say Montgomery went to great lengths to hide his wealth during their courtship, even driving a decade-old Honda Civic to their dates. The wedding, attended by Supreme Court justices, senators, and business leaders, is being called the American Society Event of the Decade. Notably absent from the festivities were the bride's parents and brother, though the reason for their absence remains unclear. My mother's scream could be heard 3 tables away. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking so badly she dropped it twice. 23 missed calls. She gasped, scrolling frantically. "Robert, I have 23 missed calls. From my sister, from the neighbors, oh God, from your boss." My father was already on his phone, watching his own missed calls pile up. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally horror as the implications hit him. "Linda," he said slowly, "Marcus drives a Honda Civic, that architect who we said wasn't good enough. Linda, what have we done?" Derek, meanwhile, had pulled up Google on his phone. His face was green as he read aloud, "Marcus Montgomery, net worth $2.8 billion. Heir to Montgomery Industries, chairman of Montgomery Foundation, named one of America's most eligible bachelors by Forbes. Dad, it says here he owns half of downtown Chicago." "Call her," my mother shrieked. "Call Kathleen right now." But I wasn't answering. While they huddled around Derek's phone in a Parisian restaurant, frantically trying to reach me, I was cutting my wedding cake with my husband, surrounded by people who actually wanted to be there. Derek tried first, then my mother, then my father. The calls came in rapid succession, a desperate symphony of ringtones I couldn't hear over the orchestra playing at my reception. "It's not going through," my mother wailed. "She's not answering." Derek, try again. By the time they'd made 20 calls between them, other diners were staring. The sophisticated Parisian atmosphere my mother had craved was shattered by their panic. Madame the maitre d'hotel approached carefully. "Perhaps you would be more comfortable continuing this in your room." But my parents were beyond caring about appearances. My father was calculating on his phone, trying to find immediate flights back to Chicago. "Everything's booked," he said desperately. "Every flight for the next 3 days. How is that possible?" Derek, still Googling, made another discovery. The Whitmore Hotel. "Dad, it says here, the Whitmore chain was acquired by Montgomery Industries last year. We're staying in Marcus's hotel." The irony wasn't lost on them. They'd bragged for weeks about getting reservations at the exclusive Whitmore, about how it showed their sophistication and success. Now they were sitting in Marcus Montgomery's property, watching his wedding on Marcus Montgomery's television while Marcus Montgomery married the daughter they'd abandoned. "We have to get back," my mother said, standing so abruptly she knocked over a water glass. "We have to explain. It was a misunderstanding. We didn't know." But even as she said it, the words rang hollow. They hadn't abandoned me because they didn't know about Marcus's wealth. They'd abandoned me because they didn't value me. The money just made their choice catastrophically stupid instead of merely cruel. Back in their hotel suite, my parents' desperation reached new heights. The elegant room with its view of the Eiffel Tower had become a war room of panic and regret. My mother sat on the bed hitting redial over and over, while my father paced the carpet laptop open as he searched for any possible way home. Still no answer. My mother moaned after the 30th call. "Robert, she's not picking up. What if she never speaks to us again?" Linda stopped catastrophizing and helped me look for flights. My father snapped, though his own hands were trembling. There has to be something. People fly from Paris to Chicago every day. Derek was slumped in a chair, his phone buzzing constantly with messages from friends who'd seen the news. Jessica just texted. She says the reception is at the Skyline Club. "Do you know how impossible it is to get in there? I tried to book it for a client dinner once and they laughed at me." "I don't care about the damn venue," my father roared. "I care about the fact that we just insulted one of the richest families in America." "You mean we insulted our daughter?" My mother corrected quietly, a moment of clarity breaking through her panic. "That too," my father admitted, collapsing into a chair. They kept calling. 35 times. 40. By the 50th call, my voicemail was full, but they weren't done. My mother, in a move that would haunt her for years, decided to post on social media. "So proud of our beautiful daughter on her wedding day. Wish we could be there, but Paris called love you, sweetheart." The response was immediate and brutal. "Where were you?" my Aunt Patricia commented. "Linda, how could you miss this?" "Worst parents ever," wrote someone I'd gone to high school with. "Imagine missing your daughter marrying a billionaire," another person added. The comments poured in faster than my mother could delete them. Her attempt at damage control had become a public roasting. She turned to my father, tears streaming down her face. Everyone knows what we did." My father's phone rang. He answered eagerly, hoping it might be me, but his face went pale as he listened. "Yes, Mr. Hartwell, I understand you're upset about the wedding invitation. No, you weren't excluded. It's complicated. Yes, sir, I'll explain everything when I'm back in the office." He hung up and immediately it rang again. This time it was his golf buddy. "Jim, I can explain." "What do you mean you're reconsidering our partnership?" "Jim, this has nothing to do with business." "Jim." But Jim had already hung up. The phone rang again immediately. And again. Business associates, country club members, neighbors, all calling to express their shock, their confusion, their judgment. "Turn it off," my mother begged. "Just turn it off." But my father couldn't afford to turn it off. He was watching his carefully cultivated professional network crumble in, real time. The Montgomery name carried weight in Chicago, and everyone wanted to know why Robert Sullivan had snubbed them. Derek, meanwhile, was dealing with his own crisis. His law firm's managing partner had left 3 voicemails each more severe than the last. "Derek, call me immediately. I've had 4 clients ask why their law firm wasn't invited to the Montgomery wedding. Fix this." "Mr. Sullivan, your absence from your sister's wedding is causing concerns among the partnership. We need to discuss your judgment." "Derek, consider yourself on administrative leave pending a review of how this situation reflects on the firm. Report to my office Monday morning." "They can't do that," Derek protested. "It's not illegal to miss a wedding." "It is when that wedding involves the Montgomery family and half our client base," my father said grimly. "You didn't just miss your sister's wedding son, you missed the networking opportunity of a lifetime." My mother tried calling again. Still no answer. She'd now called 55 times and my phone had long since been turned to silent, tucked away in Marcus's jacket pocket as we danced and celebrated. "Maybe if we send flowers," she suggested desperately. "The biggest arrangement they have, to the reception venue. Linda, it's midnight here. It's 6 p.m. in Chicago. Even if we could find a florist, the reception will be over before they arrive." Then to their home, where do they live? Derek looked up from his phone. According to this article, Marcus just bought a $40 million estate in Winnetka. That's where... Oh, God. What? That's where all the Montgomery family compounds are. She's not just married to money, Mom. She's literally moving into American royalty territory. My mother let out a wail that probably disturbed every guest on their floor. She grabbed her phone and tried one more time. Call number 60. Still no answer. "We have to go home," she said, "right now, tonight." "I told you everything's booked," my father repeated. "Then we'll go to the airport and wait on standby. We'll take a train to London and fly from there. We'll rent a private jet if we have to." "With what money?" my father asked bitterly. "We spent our savings on this trip, remember? The trip that was more important than our daughter's wedding." The hotel room phone rang, cutting through their argument. My father answered warily. "Mr. Sullivan, this is the front desk. I'm calling to inform you that there's been an issue with your credit card on file. It appears to have been declined for the incidental charges. Could you please provide another form of payment?" My father's blood ran cold. He'd given them his American Express, the one that never got declined. There must be some mistake. Try it again. "We've tried it 3 times, sir. Perhaps you could contact your credit card company." After assuring the desk clerk he'd handle it, my father called American Express. What he learned made him sink onto the bed beside my mother. "What is it?" she asked, seeing his face. "The card's been flagged for unusual international activity. They need to verify charges before approving them. The representative said it's a new security measure implemented by their partner bank." He paused, swallowing hard. Montgomery Bank. The cosmic irony wasn't lost on any of them. They were trapped in Marcus's hotel using Marcus's bank's credit card, desperately trying to return to Chicago to beg forgiveness from the daughter they'd scorned for dating Marcus. "We've made 65 calls," my mother whispered, staring at her phone. 65 times I've tried to reach her. Robert, what if she never forgives us?" "Then we'll have to live with what we've done," my father said quietly. But living with it was proving harder by the minute. As the hours ticked by in Paris, their phones continued to light up with messages, missed calls, and social media notifications. The Chicago elite were talking, and the Sullivan family's absence from the Montgomery wedding was the scandal everyone was dissecting. My mother made one final attempt, her 65th call. As it went to voicemail yet again, she finally understood what her note had really meant. "Let's see how you face the guests," she'd written. Now she knew. I'd face them with grace, surrounded by my new family, while she sat in a Paris hotel room, facing only her own catastrophic choices. The next morning dawned bright and beautiful in Chicago. I woke up in Marcus's penthouse apartment, still wearing my wedding ring and a smile that wouldn't fade. My phone, finally retrieved from Marcus's jacket, showed 65 missed calls from my parents, 20 from Derek, and hundreds of texts from relatives and acquaintances. "They certainly were persistent," Marcus said, looking over my shoulder. "Are you going to call them back?" "No," I said simply. "They made their choice. Today I'm making mine." We were due at the Montgomery estate for a family brunch, a tradition Eleanor insisted upon for new family members. As we dressed, Marcus filled me in on what his father had learned through business channels. "They're still in Paris, stuck at the Whitmore. Apparently there was some confusion with their credit card." His smile was innocent, but I knew better. "Marcus Montgomery, did you have something to do with that?" Me, I would never. Though I did mention to our hotel management team that they should be extra vigilant about security protocols. Can't be too careful these days. The Montgomery estate took my breath away, even though I'd visited before. The sprawling Winnetka property looked like something from a movie with its manicured gardens and lake views. But now, it wasn't just Marcus's family home, It was my family home. Eleanor greeted us at the door herself, dismissing the staff with a wave. "Kathleen, darling, how are you feeling this morning? Ready to officially join the chaos?" The brunch was intimate by Montgomery standards, only immediate family and a few close friends. Charlotte had brought her partner Diana, a pediatric surgeon. Marcus's cousin James was there with his wife. About 20 people total, all welcoming me with genuine warmth. "I've taken the liberty of having your things moved from your apartment," Grace informed me casually. "The movers will have everything at the Winnetka house by evening, unless you had other plans." I thought of my small apartment, of the life I'd built independently, and felt a moment of vertigo. Everything was changing so fast. "That's very kind," I managed. "Nonsense, you're family now. We take care of our own." Halfway through brunch, Charlotte's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression hardened. "Father, you need to see this." She showed him her phone and Richard's face darkened. He whispered something to Grace, who immediately looked concerned. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "Your in-laws have become quite creative in their attempts to return to Chicago," Richard said carefully. "They've been contacting mutual acquaintances asking for help with flights." I felt my stomach twist. Who did they call? "Several of my business associates, Judge Hoffman, the mayor's office, if you can believe it. They're claiming there was a family emergency and they need to return immediately." Eleanor sniffed disdainfully. "The only emergency is their sudden realization of what they've lost." "There's more," Charlotte added reluctantly. "Aunt Patricia has been making the rounds on social media trying to do damage control. She's posting old photos of you with your parents, talking about how close your family has always been. She showed me Patricia's latest post, a photo from my college graduation with my parents captioned, 'Family is everything. So proud of our dear Kathleen. Can't wait to celebrate with her soon.'" The comments below were scathing. People who'd been at the wedding were calling out the lies, posting photos of the empty family section, asking where this close family had been yesterday. "I need some air," I said, standing abruptly. Marcus followed me to the garden where we sat by the lake. The contrast between this peaceful moment and the chaos my parents were creating was stark. "They're going to keep trying," I said quietly. "They won't stop until they find a way to make this about them." "Then we'll handle it," Marcus said simply. "Together." "Your family must think I come with so much baggage." "My family thinks you're remarkable. Do you know what grandmother said this morning? She said she hasn't seen me this happy since my mother died, that you've brought light back into our family." Inside, the family was strategizing. Richard had his lawyer on the phone discussing options. Grace was coordinating with their PR team. But it was Eleanor who surprised me most. "Kathleen," she called me over. "Sit with me." I sat beside the Montgomery matriarch, feeling like a child despite my 28 years. "I was estranged from my father for 10 years, she said quietly. "He didn't approve of my marriage to Marcus's grandfather, said I was marrying beneath me." She laughed a dry sound. "George built this entire empire from nothing, and my father died too proud to admit he was wrong." "I'm sorry," I said, not sure what else to offer. "Don't be sorry, be smart. Your parents will eventually make it back to Chicago. They'll show up at your door with tears and apologies and expectations of forgiveness. The question is, what do you want?" I thought about it, really thought about it. I want them to understand that they can't hurt me anymore, that their approval or disapproval doesn't define my worth. Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Good, then we'll make sure that's exactly what happens." The rest of the brunch passed peacefully, but I could see the Montgomery machine working in the background. Calls were made, plans were laid. This family didn't just react to problems, they anticipated and neutralized them. As we were leaving, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot from someone at my father's company. An internal email had gone out announcing that Robert Sullivan would be taking some personal time to address family matters. "They're already feeling the consequences," Marcus noted, reading over my shoulder. But I didn't feel vindicated, just sad. They'd created this situation entirely on their own, and now they were paying the price. That evening, as movers efficiently transferred my life from my small apartment to the Winnetka estate, I found the photo album my mother had made for my high school graduation. Page after page of family photos, but looking at them now, I could see what I'd been blind to before. In every photo, I stood slightly apart. In every group shot, my parents angled toward Derek. The evidence had always been there. I closed the album and handed it to the movers. "This can go in storage," I said. Marcus appeared with a glass of wine and a gentle smile. "Charlotte called. Your parents made it to London. They're trying to book a flight from there." "How long before they make it back?" "Richard's estimate 2 days minimum, 3 more likely." 3 days. I'd been married for less than 24 hours and already my new life felt more real than the 28 years that came before. "When they get here," I said slowly, "I don't want to see them. Not yet. Maybe not ever." "Then you won't," Marcus said simply. "Security has already been briefed. The estate is private property. They won't get past the gates unless you want them to." I thought of my parents frantically making their way back to Chicago, burning bridges with their desperation. They'd spent my entire life making me feel secondary, optional, disposable. Now they were learning what it felt like to be on the outside, looking in at a life they could have been part of. "Your grandmother was right," I said. "Family isn't about blood, it's about choice." "And we choose you," Marcus said, pulling me close. "Every day we'll keep choosing you." As the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I stood in my new home, surrounded by boxes of my old life. Somewhere over the Atlantic, my parents were desperately trying to undo their choices. But here, in this moment, I was finally exactly where I belonged. Monday morning arrived with all the force of a Midwest summer storm. The wedding coverage had exploded over the weekend with society blogs and news outlets picking up the story of the Montgomery heirs' surprise nuptials. But it was the family drama that really captured attention. I was sitting in the breakfast nook of our Winnetka home, marveling at how natural it felt to call it our home, when Marcus came in with his tablet. "You might want to see this," he said, though his expression suggested maybe I didn't. The Chicago Tribune Society page had run a full feature, "The Wedding That Shocked Chicago High Society." But it was the subtitle that made my heart sink, "Montgomery Heir Marries Despite Family Abandonment." The article was surprisingly well-researched. They'd interviewed wedding guests, tracked down the Paris hotel where my parents had posted their champagne photos, even found Derek's smug social media posts about escaping family obligations. The journalist had painted a devastating picture of parents who chose vacation over their daughter's wedding, only to discover they'd missed their chance at connecting with one of America's most powerful families. "I didn't want this to be about them," I said, pushing the tablet away. "It's not," Marcus assured me. "Look at the last paragraph." I read it aloud. "Despite the family drama sources close to the couple say the new Mrs. Montgomery handled the situation with remarkable grace. She didn't let it ruin her day," one guest observed. "If anything, it showed everyone exactly what kind of person she is, someone who rises above petty cruelty and chooses joy instead." "See, you're the heroine of this story, not the victim." Charlotte arrived an hour later with a security briefing that made my head spin. Apparently, reporters had been trying to track down my parents' return flight information. 3 different news outlets had requested interviews with me. Someone had even started a Twitter hashtag, "We're Weddinggate Chicago." "It'll die down in a few days," Charlotte assured me. "Something else will capture their attention. Though you should know Mother has been fielding calls all morning from various charity boards wanting to know if you'll be taking an active role in the Montgomery Foundation." "I hadn't thought about it," I admitted. "Well, start thinking. You're not just married to Marcus. You're a Montgomery now. That comes with opportunities and responsibilities." She was right, of course. I'd been so focused on my family's betrayal that I hadn't fully processed what joining the Montgomery family meant beyond the wealth and status. Marcus sensed my overwhelm. Which is why, he announced, we're leaving for our honeymoon this afternoon. This afternoon, but I thought we weren't going until next week. Change of plans. The jet's ready, the island's waiting, and frankly, I think we both need some time away from the circus. He showed me his phone where I glimpsed an itinerary for a private island resort in the Caribbean. 2 weeks of absolute privacy and luxury. But what about my parents? They're probably landing in the next day or two. Eleanor, who'd arrived with Charlotte, spoke up. Perfect timing then. Let them return to the consequences of their choices without you here to absorb their drama. She was right. If I stayed, I'd be tempted to listen to their excuses to let them drag me back into old patterns. Distance would give me clarity and them time to truly understand what they'd thrown away. I went upstairs to pack my phone, buzzing constantly on the dresser. I finally looked at it, scrolling through the missed calls. 65 from my mother, 20 from Derek, 15 from my father. Various numbers from aunts, uncles, cousins, all suddenly interested in reconnecting. But it was a text from my former coworker that caught my attention. Your mom just called the literacy center asking for your new address. Janet didn't give it to her but thought you should know. They were already trying to track me down, and they weren't even back in the country yet. A knock on the bedroom door interrupted my packing. Grace Montgomery entered with a sleek travel bag. I took the liberty of having some resort wear delivered, she said, unzipping the bag to reveal designer sundresses and swimsuits. Consider it a wedding gift. Grace, this is too much. Nonsense, you're my daughter now, let me spoil you a little. She sat on the bed watching me fold clothes. Can I give you some advice? I nodded. When Richard and I were first married, his family was against it. I was new money, you see. Texas Oil. They were old Chicago society. The first year was brutal. Every family gathering, every charity event, I could feel their judgment. She smiled at the memory, but Richard chose me. Every day he chose me. And eventually, they had no choice but to accept it. My parents aren't society people judging my choice, I pointed out. They're just cruel. Which makes it easier in a way. You don't need their approval. You never did. But it took them showing you their worst for you to finally see it. Downstairs, Marcus was coordinating our departure with military precision. The jet would take us to a private airstrip where a boat would ferry us to the island. No flight manifests for reporters to track, no hotel registrations to leak. Your phone, he said, holding out his hand. You won't need it where we're going. I hesitated. Those 65 missed calls felt like a weight in my pocket. They can wait, he said gently. You've waited your whole life for them to prioritize you. 2 weeks won't kill them. I handed over the phone, feeling suddenly lighter. Charlotte drove us to the private airport, filling the ride with tactical advice. Security knows not to give out any information. The house staff has been briefed. If your parents show up at the estate, they'll be politely but firmly turned away. And if they make a scene, then they'll be escorted off the property by local police. Father's already had a word with the chief. The Montgomerys didn't just have money, they had infrastructure, systems in place to protect their own, and I was their own now. At the airport, Marcus's assistant Oliver was waiting with a final briefing. Sir, Mrs. Sullivan, there's been a development. The Tribune received a tip that Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan Sr. are on a flight landing tonight. They're planning to meet them at the airport. From who? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Your Aunt Patricia, we believe. She's been quite active on social media, suggesting she's coordinating the family reconciliation. Of course she was. Patricia loved drama almost as much as she loved being at the center of it. Thank you, Oliver, Marcus said calmly. Please ensure our PR team is aware, and Oliver, make sure the Tribune knows we're unavailable for comment as we're enjoying our honeymoon. The pointed message would be clear while my parents scrambled to return and save face. Marcus and I were moving forward with our lives. As we boarded the sleek private jet, I marveled at how different this was from the honeymoon we'd originally planned. A long weekend in Michigan's wine country, staying at a modest bed and breakfast. That seemed like a lifetime ago now. No regrets? Marcus asked as we settled into the plush leather seats. I thought about my parents probably somewhere over the Atlantic planning their strategy for winning me back, about Derek facing his law firm's partners, about the circus waiting for us back in Chicago. None, I said firmly. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be. As Chicago disappeared below us, I left behind more than just a city. I left behind 28 years of being second choice, of accepting scraps of affection, of making myself smaller to avoid disappointment. My phone powered off and locked in a drawer at home would accumulate more missed calls. 65 would become 70, 80, 100, but I wouldn't be there to count them. Instead, I'd be on a private island with my husband learning what it felt like to be someone's first choice, learning what it felt like to be truly, completely, unconditionally loved. The Caribbean stretched out below us, turquoise and infinite. Behind us, my parents' plane carried them toward a Chicago that had already moved on without them. They'd returned to find their daughter gone, their reputations tarnished, their choices irreversible. But that was their story to live with now. Mine was just beginning. 3 days into our Caribbean honeymoon, I was floating in the infinity pool of our private villa when Marcus appeared with his tablet, a reluctant expression on his face. "I debated whether to show you this," he said, "but Charlotte insisted you should know what's happening back home." The Chicago Sun-Times had published a photo that made my stomach turn. There were my parents at O'Hare Airport looking haggard and desperate, surrounded by reporters. My mother's usually perfect hair was disheveled, my father's suit wrinkled from the long journey. But it was the large banner Derek was holding that truly stunned me. "We're sorry, Kathleen, please come home." They actually brought a banner to the airport, I said, incredulous. "It gets worse," Marcus said gently. "Watch the video." The news clip showed my mother sobbing dramatically for the cameras. "We made a terrible mistake," she wailed. "We just want our daughter back. Kathleen, sweetheart, if you're watching this, please call us. Please let us explain." My father stepped forward, clearly trying to take control of the narrative. "This has all been blown out of proportion. We had this trip planned for months. We didn't know the wedding date would conflict." The reporter's follow-up was brutal. "But Mr. Sullivan's social media posts show you toasting with champagne as you left for the airport at 3 in the morning. That seems deliberately celebratory." My father stammered, unable to answer, while Derek tried to push the cameras away. The spectacle was excruciating to watch. "Charlotte says they went straight from the airport to your old apartment," Marcus continued. "The building manager had to call the police when they wouldn't leave." I set down my tropical drink, my paradise moment shattered. "The police?" "They were demanding the building manager give them your forwarding address. When he refused, they tried to convince other tenants to let them in. Mrs. Kowalski from the 3rd floor apparently gave them quite an earful about being terrible parents." Despite everything, I felt a flash of warmth from my former neighbor who'd always slipped me cookies and worried I was too thin. The next update came from Oliver, who was managing things in Chicago. My parents had shown up at the literacy center where I used to work, disrupting a children's reading program with their demands to know where I was. Janet, my former supervisor, had threatened them with a restraining order. "They're spiraling," I observed, watching another news clip of them being escorted from the building. "They're desperate," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference." By evening, as we ate fresh-caught seafood on our private beach, the situation in Chicago had deteriorated further. Charlotte called with updates, each more mortifying than the last. "They tried to get into the Skyline Club for lunch, claiming they were meeting you. When that didn't work, your mother actually told the maitre d' she was Mrs. Montgomery's mother. Security had to remove them." "She claimed to be my mother-in-law," I asked, appalled. The maitre d' knew better. He was at the wedding, saw the empty family section. The whole thing was captured on someone's phone, and it's already trending on Chicago's social media. My parents, who'd spent years cultivating their image as successful, sophisticated people, were destroying their own reputation in real time. Every desperate move, every public scene, every lie told to try to find me was being documented and shared. "There's more," Charlotte said reluctantly. "They've hired a publicist. Some bottom feeder who's shopping around an exclusive tell-all interview about their side of the story. What side? I exploded. They chose Paris over my wedding. According to their narrative, it was all a misunderstanding. They claim you gave them the wrong date, that you've always been dramatic and difficult, that they're victims of the Montgomery family's elitism. The betrayal felt fresh all over again. Not only had they abandoned my wedding, now they were trying to rewrite history to make themselves the victims. Marcus took the phone from my shaking hands. Charlotte, handle it. Whatever legal means necessary. They don't get to profit from their cruelty. After he hung up, we sat in silence on the beach, the waves lapping at the shore. Paradise felt tainted now, their drama reaching across thousands of miles to disturb our peace. I'm ruining our honeymoon, I said miserably. No, Marcus said firmly. They are, but we're not going to let them. He stood pulling me up with him. Come on, we're going sailing tomorrow. No phones, no tablets, no updates from Chicago, just us and the ocean. But even as we tried to escape into our bubble of newlywed bliss, the circus in Chicago continued. The next morning, while we were preparing our sailboat, Richard Montgomery was handling the situation with corporate efficiency. He'd discovered my father had been inflating his connection to the Montgomery family to secure new clients. Words like fraud and misrepresentation were being thrown around. My father's company put him on indefinite suspension pending an investigation. Derek's situation was equally dire. His law firm mortified by the public spectacle and his association with what was being called the wedding scandal had moved from administrative leave to suggesting he might want to explore other opportunities. My mother, meanwhile, had been removed from every charity board and social committee she'd worked years to join. The same women who'd lunched with her for decades now crossed the street to avoid her. They're becoming pariahs, Grace Montgomery told me during one of our brief check-ins. It's actually rather impressive how quickly they've managed to destroy their own lives. But the pinnacle of their desperation came when they tried to access the one place they thought they had a right to be the house where I'd grown up. Security footage from the Winnetka estate showed them at the gates arguing with the guards. My mother was actually shaking the bars, screaming about her rights as a mother. My father was threatening legal action. Derek was trying to climb the fence before security firmly encouraged him to reconsider. Let me get this straight, I said to Marcus as we watched the footage on Charlotte's emergency call. They went to your family's estate thinking I'd be there. The level of entitlement is staggering, Charlotte agreed. They genuinely believe they have a right to access your life whenever they choose. The police were called. Again. This time there were formal trespassing warnings issued. The local news, which had been following the story with glee, was there to capture every mortifying moment. The headline the next day was brutal. Parents who skipped daughter's wedding attempt break in at Montgomery Estate. From our sailboat in the Caribbean, anchored in a secluded cove, I watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere in Chicago, my parents were facing the consequences of their choices. Every bridge they'd burned in their desperation to reach me only proved why I'd been right to leave no forwarding address. You know what the ironic part is? I said to Marcus as we stargazed from the deck that night. If they'd just left me alone, if they'd given me space to process their betrayal, maybe someday I could have forgiven them. But this desperate public manipulative campaign, they're showing everyone exactly who they really are. Who they've always been, Marcus corrected gently. You just see it clearly now. A shooting star streaked across the sky and I didn't make a wish. For the first time in my life, I had everything I needed. Let my parents exhaust themselves against the walls the Montgomerys had built around me. Let them taste the rejection they'd served me my whole life. I was done being their afterthought, their disappointment, their second choice. I was Kathleen Montgomery now, and I was finally truly free. By the time we'd been in paradise for a week, the situation in Chicago had evolved from desperate to pathetic. Charlotte had been sending daily briefings despite our attempts to disconnect, and each update painted a grimmer picture of my parents' spectacular fall from grace. You need to see this, she said during one video call, her face serious. They've reached a new low. The Chicago Society magazine, a glossy publication that covered the city's elite, had published a devastating expose. The cover story, titled "The Parents Who Missed the Wedding of the Century," included interviews with dozens of people who'd witnessed my parents' behavior over the years. Former friends revealed how my mother had bragged about their Paris trip for months, specifically mentioning how it was more important than some little family event. Co-workers of my father shared how he'd complained about the waste of money. My wedding would be how he'd said I was marrying beneath me anyway. But it was Derek's interview that shocked me most. My brother, in what appeared to be a desperate attempt to save his own career, had thrown our parents under the bus completely. I tried to tell them, he was quoted as saying, I said we should at least make an appearance at Kathleen's wedding. But my mother was determined to make a point. She said Kathleen needed to learn that the world didn't revolve around her. The magazine had done their research thoroughly. They'd found photos from every family event where I'd been sidelined, Christmas cards where I was positioned at the edge, barely in frame, my graduation photos where my parents were checking their phones. The pattern was undeniable and now publicly documented. This is humiliating for them, I said, scrolling through the digital edition on Marcus's tablet. This is accountability, Charlotte corrected, something they've apparently never faced before. The social destruction was swift and complete. My mother's book club didn't just remove her, they issued a statement distancing themselves from her values and behavior. The country club my father had spent years cultivating membership to send a formal letter suggesting he might be happier elsewhere. Their neighbors in Lincoln Park, people who'd smiled and waved for decades, now actively avoided them. Someone had even started a petition to have them removed from the neighborhood watch committee, citing character concerns. Marcus found me on the beach one afternoon, staring at the waves with tears streaming down my face. I didn't want this, I said as he sat beside me. I just wanted them to love me, or at least pretend convincingly. You didn't cause this, he reminded me. Every consequence they're facing is a direct result of their own choices. Not just missing the wedding, but years of treating you as less than. He was right, but it didn't make watching their destruction any easier. These were still my parents, the people who'd raised me even if they'd done it badly. Some part of me, probably the part that would always be that little girl seeking their approval, felt guilty. Eleanor called that evening with her trademark directness. Stop feeling guilty, she commanded before I'd even said hello. I know you are because you're a good person, but guilt is wasted on people who feel no remorse. How do you know they feel no remorse? Because remorseful people apologize and change. They don't hire publicists and try to break into private property. Your parents are only sorry they're facing consequences, not sorry for what they did. She was right, of course. Every action they'd taken since returning from Paris had been about them. Their reputation, their image, their access to the life they thought they deserved. Not once had they simply said, "We were wrong and we're sorry," without qualifiers or excuses. The next day brought fresh humiliation for them. Derek's law firm officially terminated his employment, citing actions incompatible with the firm's values. The legal community in Chicago was small and gossipy. Everyone knew why he'd been fired. My father's situation was equally grim. Not only was he suspended from his job, but several major clients had pulled their accounts, specifically citing his poor judgment and questionable ethics as reasons for severing ties. He built that client list for 20 years, I murmured, reading the update. And destroyed it in 2 weeks, Marcus observed. That takes talent. My mother, who hadn't worked in 15 years thanks to my father's income, was now frantically applying for jobs. But who would hire someone whose public meltdown was still trending on social media? Videos of her shaking the gates of the Montgomery estate had become a meme with captions like, "When you realize you played yourself," and "Missing your daughter's wedding priceless," finding out she married a billionaire karma. The financial pressure was mounting for them. Legal fees from their various stunts, the loss of income, the Paris trip they'd charged to credit cards they could no longer pay off. The life they'd built on appearances and social climbing was crumbling. "They're going to lose the house," Charlotte informed us during another call. "My sources at the bank say they're already behind on payments." The Lincoln Park house, where I'd grown up, where they'd hosted dinner parties to impress people who now wouldn't return their calls, would soon have a foreclosure notice. It should have felt like justice. In many ways it did. But it also felt hollow. All I'd wanted was parents who chose me, who showed up for me, who loved me the way parents should love their children. Instead, I got this, a public spectacle of their selfishness and its consequences. A week later, as our honeymoon neared its end, one final piece of news reached our island paradise. The tell-all interview my parents had tried to shop around had been rejected by every outlet. Not because the media had suddenly developed ethics, but because the Montgomery legal team had made it clear that any publication running lies about their family would face swift and devastating legal action. "We protect our own," Richard had said simply when asked about it. My parents' last attempt at controlling the narrative had failed. They were left with nothing but the wreckage of their choices. No daughter to manipulate, no social status, to maintain no financial security to cushion their fall. From my lounge chair on the beach, I raised a glass of champagne. The good kind, not the cheap stuff they'd toasted with at 3 a.m. as they abandoned me. "What are we toasting?" Marcus asked, joining me with his own glass. "New beginnings," I said, "and the family we choose." As we clinked glasses, I made a decision. When we returned to Chicago, I wouldn't hide from the drama. I'd face it head-on with the support of my new family. My parents could exhaust themselves against the life they'd excluded themselves from. I had better things to do than watch them self-destruct. I had a life to build, a marriage to nurture, and a family who'd chosen me when my blood relatives couldn't be bothered. Their social destruction was complete, but my construction of a new life was just beginning. Our last day in paradise was interrupted by what Charlotte called the most pathetic attempt at manipulation yet. My parents, having exhausted every private avenue to reach me, had decided to go fully public with their campaign for forgiveness. They've hired Bradley Sterling. Charlotte said naming Chicago's most notorious crisis management publicist, the man who tried to rehabilitate that embezzling alderman's image last year. I was back on the beach, toes in the sand, when Marcus brought out his laptop to show me the live stream. Against my better judgment, I watched. My parents sat on a set that looked like a low-budget morning show with Bradley Sterling beside them like a discount therapist. My mother had clearly been styled for maximum sympathy. Conservative dress, minimal makeup tissues clutched in her hand. My father wore his best suit, but it hung loose on him now, the stress of the past 2 weeks showing in his hollow cheeks. "We just want our daughter to know we love her." My mother began, her voice catching dramatically. "This has all been a terrible misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," the interviewer pressed. "You left for Paris on your daughter's wedding day. You posted celebratory photos with champagne." "We had the dates confused," my father interjected smoothly. "We thought the wedding was the following weekend." I nearly threw Marcus's laptop into the ocean. They're actually lying on live television. But the interviewer wasn't buying it either. "Mr. Sullivan, we've obtained a copy of the wedding invitation clearly dated 3 months ago. Are you saying you misread your own daughter's wedding invitation?" My parents exchanged panicked glances. Bradley Sterling leaned forward, trying to redirect. "What's important here is that this family wants to heal. Linda and Robert have admitted they made a mistake." "Have they?" The interviewer cut him off. "Because I'm hearing excuses, not apologies." My mother burst into theatrical tears. "We're sorry, we're so sorry. We just want our little girl back." "The little girl you left a cruel note for," the interviewer read from her notes. "Let's see how you face the guests when we won't be appearing at your wedding." That doesn't sound confused about dates. That sounds deliberate. The interview was a disaster. Every attempt to spin the narrative fell apart under basic questioning. When my father tried to claim they'd always supported my relationship with Marcus, the interviewer produced screenshots of Derek's social media posts mocking Marcus the mediocre. That was taken out of context, Derek said weakly from his seat beside them. What context makes calling your sister's fiancé mediocre acceptable? The interviewer shot back. But the true revelation came near the end when the interviewer asked about their current situation. Is it true you're facing foreclosure on your home? My mother's face crumbled. My father's mask of control finally slipped. Our financial situation is temporary, he said stiffly. Once this misunderstanding with Kathleen is resolved, you mean once you have access to the Montgomery fortune, the interviewer suggested. The silence was deafening. Even Bradley Sterling couldn't spin that implication away. How dare you suggest, my mother began. I'm not suggesting anything, Mrs. Sullivan. I'm asking if your desperate attempts to contact your daughter have anything to do with your current financial crisis. We love our daughter, my mother wailed. You loved Paris more on her wedding day, the interviewer said flatly. The interview ended with my parents being hustled off the set by Bradley Sterling, who looked like he was reconsidering his career choices, but the damage was done. They'd gone on live television and revealed themselves to be exactly what everyone already knew, desperate, manipulative people who only wanted access to their daughter when she had something they needed. Marcus closed the laptop and pulled me against him. You okay? They actually thought that would work, I said amazed. They thought they could lie their way back into my life. Narcissists always think they're smarter than everyone else, Charlotte said over the phone. But the internet is forever. People have receipts. And oh, did they have receipts? Within hours, social media had exploded with fact-checking their interview. Wedding guests posted photos of the empty family section. The neighbors' security footage of them celebrating with champagne at 3 a.m. went viral again. Someone even found the receipt from their Paris hotel booking made 3 weeks before my wedding date was set. But it was my former colleagues from the Literacy Center who delivered the most damning evidence. Janet, my former supervisor, posted a statement. For 2 years, Kathleen's parents never once attended her work events despite repeated invitations. They missed her award ceremony when she was named Volunteer of the Year. They skipped the fundraiser she organized that raised $50,000 for children's literacy programs. But they never missed their son's law firm cocktail parties. The pattern was clear to everyone who bothered to look. The comments under their interview video were brutal. Imagine being so narcissistic you think you can gaslight an entire city. The mom's fake tears dried up real quick when they asked about money. Team Kathleen forever. These people are toxic. My parents did something similar. No contact was the best decision I ever made. That last comment stuck with me. No contact. It sounded so final, so absolute. But what was the alternative? Let them back in to hurt me again. Give them access to my new life so they could poison it with their toxicity. Richard called with a legal update. They've been sending letters to the Montgomery Industries headquarters trying to claim grandparent rights to future children you might have. We don't even have children yet. Exactly. They're so desperate they're trying to claim rights to hypothetical grandchildren. My legal team is having a field day with this. Grace added her own observation during a separate call. They're showing you who they are, Kathleen. Believe them. People who love you don't ambush you on live television with lies. They don't try to manipulate public opinion to force you into contact. She was right. Every action they'd taken since returning from Paris had been about control, not love. They wanted access to my life, not a relationship with me. They wanted the benefits of being connected to the Montgomery family without having done any of the work of being an actual family to me. That night, as Marcus and I packed to return to Chicago, I made a decision. I want to release a statement, I told him. One time, my words, my truth, then I'm done talking about them. Marcus kissed my forehead. Whatever you need, Charlotte can coordinate with the PR team. I spent hours crafting it, making sure every word was precise. I have been deeply moved by the outpouring of support following my wedding. To address the speculation, yes, my parents chose to vacation in Paris rather than attend my wedding. This was their choice, made with full knowledge of the date and significance of the event. While I am saddened by their decision and subsequent behavior, I am choosing to focus on the future with my husband and the family who has welcomed me with open arms. I ask for privacy as I process these events and request that the media respect my decision to move forward. I will not be discussing this matter further. Short, clear, and final. No room for misinterpretation or manipulation. Charlotte released it the morning we flew back to Chicago. By the time we landed, it had been picked up by every major outlet. The public response was overwhelmingly supportive. My parents predictably tried to respond with their own statement, but no reputable outlet would run it after their disastrous interview. They were left posting on social media to dwindling followers, most of whom were only watching for the continued train wreck. As we drove through the gates of the Montgomery estate past the security my parents had tried to breach, I felt something settle in my chest. This was my home now. These were my people, and no amount of public manipulation could change that. My parents had made their final plea, and it had failed spectacularly. They'd shown the world exactly who they were, and the world had judged accordingly. There would be no reconciliation because there was nothing to reconcile. You can't repair a relationship that never existed. I was done being their prop, their afterthought, their plan B when plan A fell through. I was Kathleen Montgomery, and I was finally, truly, completely free. 6 months after the wedding, autumn had painted Chicago in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. From my office at the Montgomery Foundation, where I'd taken on the role of Director of Literacy Initiatives, I could see the city stretching out below, vibrant and alive. The drama of the summer felt like a lifetime ago, though its echoes still occasionally surfaced. Charlotte knocked on my door, entering with a thick manila envelope. "This requires your attention," she said, her expression carefully neutral. Inside was a formal letter from my parents' latest attorney, their fourth, according to Richard's count. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. They were suing for emotional damages and defamation related to the wedding incident. "They're actually suing me?" I laughed, the sound more disbelieving than bitter. "With what money?" "That's the interesting part," Charlotte said, sitting across from my desk. "They've apparently convinced some ambulance chaser to take it on contingency. He thinks the Montgomery name means deep pockets for a settlement." I set the letter aside, surprisingly unmoved by this latest attempt at manipulation. "What does Richard recommend?" "Countersue for harassment. Get a restraining order. Bury them in legal fees they can't afford." She paused. "But he wanted me to ask what you want to do." I gazed out at the city, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 6 months ago, this would have devastated me. Now it was just another desperate grab for attention from people who'd lost all power over me. Nothing, I decided. File it away. Let them waste their money on a case that'll be thrown out. I have better things to focus on. And I did. The literacy program I'd developed had just received a $1 million grant. We were expanding to 20 new schools, bringing reading programs to thousands of children who, like me, might need to find refuge in books. Marcus and I were settled into our Winnetka home, hosting dinner parties where chosen family gathered around our table. Life was full and rich and meaningful in ways I'd never imagined. But the universe wasn't quite done with the lessons my parents needed to learn. Derek reached out through LinkedIn, of all places, his message carefully worded. "Kathleen, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. The favoritism, the cruelty, the way they used me as a weapon against you. I'm in therapy trying to understand how I became someone who could celebrate abandoning his sister's wedding. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what we put you through. I'm sorry." It was the first genuine apology from any of them. No excuses, no justifications, no hidden requests, just acknowledgement and remorse. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Maybe someday when the wounds weren't so fresh, there might be room for a conversation, but not today. The real lesson learned came to light when I ran into my Aunt Patricia at a charity gala. She tried to avoid me, but we ended up face to face at the silent auction table. "Kathleen," she said awkwardly, "you look well." "I am well," I replied simply. She fidgeted with her bidding paddle. "Your parents, they're not doing well. Your mother had to take a job at a department store. Your father is working as a consultant, barely making ends meet. They sold the house." "I'm aware." "They've learned their lesson," she pressed. "They know they were wrong. They talk about you all the time, about how proud they are of what you've accomplished." "No," I said firmly. "They're proud of who I married. There's a difference." Patricia's face flushed. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? Where were they when I graduated summa cum laude? When I won teaching awards? When I spent weekends building libraries in underserved communities? They only became proud when my last name became Montgomery." She had no response to that because we both knew it was true. I learned through professional channels that their situation had indeed become dire. The house in Lincoln Park sold for less than they owed. They'd moved to a small apartment in a less fashionable neighborhood. My father's consulting business struggled as his reputation preceded him. My mother's retail job paid minimum wage. Derek, unable to find work at any reputable law firm in Chicago, had moved to a small town in Indiana to work at a legal aid clinic. The Golden family who'd once looked down on my choices was now living a life far more modest than anything I'd ever aspired to. But there was no satisfaction in their downfall, only a sad recognition of waste. They'd had everything: a comfortable life, successful careers, 2 children who might have loved them, and they'd thrown it all away for what? The satisfaction of hurting me. The thrill of choosing Derek over me one more time. Grace found me in the Foundation's library one afternoon, surrounded by children's books I was reviewing for our program. "You're thinking about them," she observed, settling into a chair beside me. "Am I that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been watching you flourish for 6 months. What's brought them to mind?" I showed her Derek's message and Patricia's attempted guilt trip. She read both thoughtfully. "You know what strikes me?" she said finally. "They're still making it about them. Derek's message is the closest to taking responsibility, but even he centers his own journey. Patricia wants you to feel guilty about their circumstances. Your parents sue for damages. It's still all about them." She was right. Even in their downfall, they couldn't see beyond themselves. The lesson they'd learned wasn't that they'd failed as parents, but that their failure had consequences they didn't like. The real tragedy, Grace continued, is that they could have been part of this. She gestured at the books around us, the Foundation's work, the life I'd built. They could have been grandparents to your future children, part of family dinners celebrated at holidays. They chose Paris over all of it. That evening, Marcus and I hosted dinner for his grandmother Eleanor, who at 90 was still sharp as a blade. Over dessert, she fixed me with those penetrating eyes. "They've learned nothing," she said bluntly. "I've been watching, through my connections. They blame everyone but themselves. The media, the Montgomerys, even you, for not warning them about Marcus's wealth. They've learned that actions have consequences, but not that their actions were wrong." "Then what was the point of it all?" I asked, feeling suddenly tired. "The point, my dear, was never about them. It was about you. You learned you deserved better. You learned to stop accepting crumbs when you deserved a feast. You learned that family isn't about blood, but about choice." She reached over to pat my hand. "They may have learned nothing, but you learned everything." She was right. The lesson was never for them. It was for me. Every cruel choice they'd made had led me here to a life filled with purpose and love and chosen family who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That night, as Marcus and I prepared for bed in our beautiful home, I made a decision. I pulled out a piece of Montgomery Foundation letterhead and wrote one final letter. "Mom and Dad, I received notice of your lawsuit. I won't be fighting it not because you have merit, but because I have better uses for my time and energy. You've spent 6 months trying to force your way back into my life through manipulation, public scenes, and now legal action. Not once have you simply said, "We were wrong, we're sorry, and we love you," without conditions or expectations. I've learned to live without your approval, something I should have done years ago. I've built a life filled with people who choose me, who show up for me, who love me without conditions. I've learned that's what I deserved all along. I hope someday you find peace with your choices. I have found peace with mine. I am not interested in reconciliation at this time. Please respect this boundary. Kathleen. I sealed it, addressed it to their attorney, and felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. They'd learned that actions have consequences. I'd learned that I deserved love. In the end, only one of those lessons led to happiness. 1 year after the wedding that changed everything, I stood in the nursery of our Winnetka home, my hand resting on my growing belly. The spring sunshine streamed through windows that overlooked Lake Michigan, painting the pale yellow walls in golden light. Marcus had insisted on hiring the best designers, but I'd wanted to paint the room ourselves to build this space with our own hands for our daughter. "She's going to be so loved," Marcus said from the doorway, watching me arrange books on the shelves we'd installed together. "She is." I agreed, placing Goodnight Moon next to The Velveteen Rabbit, classics I'd read alone as a child, but would read to her surrounded by family. The Montgomery Foundation's literacy program had exploded beyond our wildest dreams. We'd reached 50,000 children in our first year with programs in 60 schools across Illinois. The media had dubbed it the Kathleen Initiative, though I'd tried to discourage the name. But Eleanor had overruled me. "You've earned the recognition," she'd said firmly. "Let them see what you've built." What I'd built extended far beyond the foundation. The dining room that had once hosted tense Sullivan family dinners, where I'd shrunk into my chair, now rang with laughter every Sunday when our chosen family gathered. Charlotte and Diana Richard and Grace Eleanor presiding from the head of the table like a benevolent queen. Sarah and her new husband Janet from the Literacy Center, Marcus's college friends, who'd become mine. The family I'd created instead of the one I'd been born into. The doorbell chimed and I heard voices downstairs, the contractor arriving to discuss the playroom renovation. As I descended the stairs, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back bore little resemblance to the girl who'd stood frozen in her childhood bedroom, reading that cruel note. This woman stood tall, confident, 7 months pregnant, and glowing with purpose. "Mrs. Montgomery," the contractor greeted me warmly. "Ready to look at the plans?" Mrs. Montgomery. A year later, the name still sometimes surprised me, not because of the wealth or status it carried, but because of the love it represented. The choice Marcus had made to build a life with me, and the choice his family had made to embrace me fully. Later that afternoon, I had a checkup with Dr. Chen, the obstetrics chief at Northwestern Memorial, the same hospital where my parents had refused to visit when I'd had my appendix removed in college, claiming they were too busy. Now I had Grace in the waiting room, having insisted on driving me when Marcus got stuck in a board meeting. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Chen announced after the ultrasound. "She's developing beautifully. Have you decided on a name?" "Eleanor," I said without hesitation. "Eleanor Grace Montgomery." Grace squeezed my hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "Mother will be beside herself," she whispered. On the drive home, we passed through Lincoln Park. I rarely came this way anymore, but today, Grace had taken a different route due to construction. There it was. My childhood home, a sold sign finally replaced with new owners already making changes. The gardens my mother had obsessed over were gone, replaced with modern landscaping. The window of my old bedroom now had different curtains. "Do you want to stop?" Grace asked gently, noticing my gaze. "No," I said, meaning it. "That's not my home anymore." But as we drove past, I saw her. My mother waiting at the bus stop 2 blocks from the house she'd once owned. She looked older, grayer, dressed in the polyester uniform of the department store where she now worked. Our eyes met for just a moment through the tinted windows. Did she recognize the car? Did she know it was me? I'll never know because Grace didn't slow down and I didn't ask her to. My mother turned away first, checking her phone for the bus schedule. Just another stranger at a bus stop living with the consequences of her choices. That evening, I found myself in the nursery again, unpacking a delivery of baby clothes. Each tiny outfit felt like a promise that this little girl would never question whether she was wanted, never compete for scraps of attention, never wonder if she was enough. Marcus found me there holding a onesie that said "Daddy's Girl" with tears streaming down my face. "Hormones," he asked gently, pulling me into his arms. "Gratitude," I corrected. "For this life, for you, for her. For everything that had to break for this to be built." He held me tighter, understanding without explanation. We'd both learned that sometimes destruction was necessary for creation. My family had to crumble for my real family to emerge. A text lit up my phone. Sarah sending pictures from her baby shower planning session with Charlotte. "This is going to be epic," she'd written, followed by approximately 1,000 heart emojis. The shower, I knew, would be everything my family had never given me. Celebration without conditions, joy without jealousy, love without limits. Eleanor was already planning to fly in her personal party planner from New York. "My first great-grandchild deserves the best," she'd declared, brooking no argument. As I scrolled through Sarah's increasingly elaborate plans, another message popped up. This one from an unknown number, but the words were unmistakable. "Kathleen, I heard about the baby. Congratulations. I hope someday she might know her grandparents. We've changed. Please consider giving us another chance. Love, Mom." I stared at the message for a long moment, waiting for the familiar ache, the pull of obligation, the guilt. But all I felt was nothing. The woman who'd sent this message was a stranger to me now. The word "mom" held no power when it came from someone who'd chosen Paris over my wedding, who'd only reached out when I had something she wanted. I blocked the number without responding. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt. Some chances once squandered didn't regenerate. Some love once withheld couldn't be retroactively applied. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked, noticing my expression. "Everything's perfect," I said, deleting the message permanently, "just taking out some trash." He kissed my forehead, then my belly. "Good. Our girl doesn't need that kind of energy in her life." Our girl. Who would grow up surrounded by love, who would never question her worth, who would know from her first breath that she was chosen, wanted, celebrated? Who would have grandparents in Richard and Grace, a formidable great-grandmother in Eleanor, aunts and uncles in Charlotte and Diana, and all our chosen family? The nursery was nearly complete now, waiting for its occupant. On the wall hung a framed quote I'd selected: "Family isn't always blood. It's the people in your life who want you in theirs." Looking around the room, built with love and intention, I knew our daughter would never have to learn that lesson the hard way. She'd grow up knowing it as truth, surrounded by proof that family was about choice, not chance. My new beginning wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about building a future so bright, so full, so loving that the past became irrelevant. A footnote in a story that had moved far beyond its painful early chapters. As baby Eleanor kicked inside me, I made her a promise. You will always be chosen. You will always be enough. You will always belong. It was the promise my parents had never made to me, but one I'd learned to make to myself. And now I could pass it on to the next generation, breaking the cycle of conditional love once and for all. This was my new beginning. Not just as Kathleen Montgomery, but as a mother, a philanthropist, a woman who'd learned that sometimes the family you chooses you right back with a fierce love that makes all the pain that came before worthwhile. Outside the nursery window, Lake Michigan stretched endless and blue, full of possibility. Just like the life growing inside me, just like the future we were building one choice at a time. 2 years had passed since the wedding that transformed my life. Little Eleanor Grace Montgomery, now 6 months old, gurgled happily in my arms as we sat in the sunroom of our Winnetka home. Her eyes, Marcus's deep brown, tracked the mobile spinning above us, tiny hands reaching for the stars and moons that danced just beyond her grasp. "She's got your determination," Marcus observed from the doorway, watching our daughter's focused attempts to capture the elusive toys. "And your patience," I countered as she calmly waited for the mobile to spin back within reach instead of fussing. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of peaceful moment I'd never imagined possible in those dark hours after finding my parents' note. The foundation was closed for the weekend. Marcus had no board meetings, and we had nothing planned but family time. The simple luxury of it still sometimes took my breath away. Sarah burst through the front door with her usual energy, her own 3-month-old son balanced on her hip. "Sorry we're late. Someone decided to redecorate his outfit just as we were leaving." She kissed Eleanor's head, then mine. "How's my favorite goddaughter?" "Your only goddaughter," I reminded her, laughing as I passed Eleanor to her eager arms. We'd built these Sunday morning traditions carefully, deliberately. Coffee and pastries from the local bakery, babies playing on blankets spread across the floor, adults catching up on the week's events. Charlotte and Diana would arrive soon with their newly adopted twin boys. Grace and Richard were at their Florida home, but would FaceTime in later. Eleanor, the original, was spending the morning with her bridge club but had promised to stop by for lunch. "Any interesting mail this week?" Sarah asked, casually bouncing Eleanor while her son dozed in his carrier. She meant letters from my parents. They'd never stopped coming, though their frequency had dwindled from weekly to monthly. I'd stopped opening them after the first few, which all followed the same pattern. Proclamations of change, demands for access to their granddaughter, and thinly veiled references to their ongoing financial struggles. "The usual," I said, gesturing to the unopened stack I kept in a drawer. "Richard's assistant screens them now for any actual legal threats." And nothing actionable, just the same emotional manipulation, different words. The doorbell rang and Marcus went to answer it. I heard Charlotte's voice, then the chaos of 2 toddlers being released into our child-proofed space. The twins, Alexander and James, immediately made a beeline for Eleanor's toy basket, their mothers trailing behind with the tired but happy expressions of new parents. "Coffee," Diana pleaded. "Strong coffee." As I poured cups and Sarah organized the babies into a rough circle on the playmats, I felt the profound rightness of this moment. This was family. Messy, loving, chosen family who showed up not because of blood or obligation, but because they wanted to be here. "Oh, before I forget," Charlotte said, pulling out her phone, "you need to see this. Someone sent it to the Foundation's general inbox." The video was grainy, clearly taken on a phone from across a room, but I recognized the location immediately, the soup kitchen where I'd volunteered before joining the Foundation full-time. And there, ladling soup into bowls, were my parents. "Is that?" Sarah leaned in, squinting at the screen. "Community service," Charlotte confirmed. "Apparently part of a plea deal for some check fraud scheme they tried to run. They're doing 300 hours at various charities around the city." I studied my parents through the pixelated footage. They looked older, defeated, going through the motions of service without any joy or purpose. My mother's perfect manicure was gone. My father's proud posture slouched. They were performing penance, not discovering philanthropy. "How do you feel about that?" Diana asked gently. I considered the question, bouncing Eleanor as she started to fuss. How did I feel? There was no satisfaction in seeing them brought low, no vindication in their court-mandated charity work. If anything, I felt empty. They were strangers serving soup to other strangers, their connection to me severed so completely that watching them felt like viewing historical footage of people I'd once known. "I don't feel anything," I realized aloud. "They're just people, not my parents, just people who made choices and are living with consequences." Marcus squeezed my shoulder, understanding in his touch. We'd talked about this extensively in therapy. the point where forgiveness became irrelevant because the relationship itself had dissolved. You can't forgive people who no longer exist in your life in any meaningful way. Eleanor Grace chose that moment to demonstrate her newest skill, rolling from her back to her belly. We all cheered the video of my parents forgotten in the celebration of this tiny milestone. Charlotte's twins clapped enthusiastically, not understanding, but caught up in the excitement. "She'll be crawling before you know it," Grace warned through FaceTime Richard, visible in the background making silly faces at the camera. "Better baby-proof everything twice." The morning flowed into afternoon brunch, appearing courtesy of Marcus's expert coordination with our housekeeper. As we sat around the dining table, babies in high chairs and bouncy seats, conversation flowing as easily as the mimosas, I marveled at the fullness of my life. A toast. Eleanor announced, having arrived fashionably late as always. At 92, she still commanded every room she entered. To family. The kind you choose, the kind you build, and the kind you nurture with intention and love. We raised our glasses, juice for the nursing mothers, champagne for the rest, and I felt the truth of her words settle deep in my bones. This was what I'd been searching for my whole life without knowing it. Not my parents' approval or attention, but this, a table full of people who chose each other daily, who showed up for the mundane moments and the milestones alike. After everyone left and Eleanor was down for her afternoon nap, Marcus found me in the nursery reading through a stack of children's books donated to the foundation. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, settling beside me in the oversized rocking chair. "I was thinking about forgiveness," I admitted. "Everyone always talks about it like it's this necessary thing, like you can't move on without it. But I have moved on, completely, without forgiving them." "Maybe moving on is its own form of forgiveness," Marcus suggested. "Not absolving them, but releasing yourself from the burden of their choices." I considered this watching dust motes dance in the afternoon sunlight. I spent so many years trying to earn their love, thinking if I just achieved enough, succeeded enough, made them proud enough, they'd finally see me, choose me. And now I know their inability to love me was never about me. It was always about them. Their limitations, their brokenness, their choices. I turned to face him fully. I can't forgive them because forgiveness implies a relationship to repair, but I can release them. Let them live their small lives while I live my full one. That evening, as I tucked Eleanor into her crib, I made a decision. I retrieved the stack of unopened letters from the drawer and without ceremony or drama, fed them into the shredder. Each page turned to confetti, their words unread and now unreadable. The last letter was different. The envelope bore Derek's handwriting. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single page and a check. "Kathleen. This is the last letter I'll send. I've been in therapy for 2 years now, unpacking the golden child syndrome that made me complicit in your pain. I understand now that my silence was violence, my participation was cruelty, and my privilege came at your expense. The check is for $50, the same amount they left you on your wedding day. I know money can't undo the past, but I wanted to acknowledge the symbolism of that insult. Please donate it to your foundation. I'm building a different life now, one based on merit rather than favoritism. I hope someday, if you're ever willing, we might have a conversation, not as the people we were, but as who we're becoming. Until then, know that I see it all now, and I'm sorry. Derek." I stood holding the letter, feeling something shift inside me. This was accountability. Not the desperate manipulation of my parents, but genuine recognition of harm done and responsibility taken. I wouldn't reach out. The wounds were still too deep. But I tucked the letter into Eleanor's baby book. Someday, when she was older, I'd tell her about the uncle she never knew, and the lesson that people can change, but only when they truly want to. The check I would donate as he'd asked, $50 toward teaching a child to read, turning a symbol of cruelty into a seed of kindness. As I returned to the living room, Marcus had lit a fire in the fireplace. We curled up together on the sofa, the baby monitor glowing softly beside us, showing our daughter sleeping peacefully. "No more letters," I told him. "I'm done with that chapter." And this chapter. I looked around our home, the photos of our chosen family covering every surface, Eleanor's toys scattered across the rug, the remnants of a day spent in love and laughter still warming the rooms. "This chapter is about building forward," I said. "About raising Eleanor to know her worth from day one. About growing the foundation to reach more children. About Sunday brunches and bedtime stories and all the ordinary moments that make a life extraordinary. About choosing joy," Marcus added, pulling me closer. "Yes," I agreed, "about choosing joy." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing Chicago in pristine white. A fresh start, a clean slate, a world of possibilities. Inside, we were warm and safe and whole. A family built not on blood or obligation, but on the revolutionary act of choosing each other again and again, every single day. My parents were out there somewhere in the city, serving their court-mandated hours, living their diminished lives, still probably crafting their next attempt at contact. But they were no longer my story. They were footnotes in a tale that had evolved far beyond their small imaginations. My story was here in this house, full of love with this man who saw my worth when I couldn't, with this daughter who would never question her place in the world. My story was in the thousands of children learning to read through the foundation, in the family dinners that rang with genuine laughter, in the quiet moments of profound gratitude for a life I'd never dared to dream possible. As we sat watching the fire, Eleanor's soft breathing through the monitor providing a gentle soundtrack, I thought about that scared girl standing in her wedding dress, abandoned and alone. I wished I could tell her, "It gets so much better. The pain you're feeling is labor pains birthing you into the life you deserve. Those who can't see your value will fall away, making room for those who will treasure you like gold." "Hold on," I'd tell her. "Your real family is coming, and they'll choose you so completely, so fiercely, so permanently, that you'll forget what it felt like to beg for scraps of love. You'll forget because you'll be too busy living a life so full of joy it erases the shadows of the past. Too busy being chosen to remember being rejected. Too busy building something beautiful to mourn what had to break." The fire crackled. Marcus pressed a kiss to my temple, and somewhere upstairs, our daughter slept safely in her crib, dreaming baby dreams of milk and comfort and morning cuddles. This was my happily ever after. Not a fairy tale ending, but a real life beginning. A chosen family, a purposeful life. A love that showed up every day in big moments and small ones, proving again and again that I was worth choosing. And that more than any revenge or vindication was the ultimate triumph. I'd built a life so beautiful that their absence wasn't a loss. It was a gift. The gift of space to become who I was meant to be, surrounded by people who celebrated that becoming. As the snow continued to fall outside our windows, I closed my eyes and made a wish, not for myself, but for anyone reading this, who's ever felt unchosen, unseen, unloved by those who should have loved them most. May you find your people. May you build your family. May you discover that the love you deserve was never theirs to give, but always yours to find. And may you choose joy again and again until it becomes so natural you forget you ever lived any other way. "What are you thinking?" Marcus whispered, noticing my smile. "Just grateful," I said simply, "for all of it, even the pain that led us here." He understood because that's what chosen family does. They understand without explanation, love, without condition, show up without being asked. And as we sat there in the firelight, our daughter safe, above us, our chosen family scattered across the city, but held close in our hearts, I knew with absolute certainty, this is what love looks like. This is what family means. This is what happens when you stop accepting less than you deserve and start building more than you ever dreamed possible. The girl who found that cruel note on her wedding day was gone, transformed into a woman who'd learned the most important lesson of all. You can't make people choose you, but you can choose yourself, and in doing so, attract those who'll choose you too. And that choice, that daily radical revolutionary act of choosing joy and love and family by intention, that's the real happily ever after. Have you ever had to choose between accepting toxic family behavior and protecting your own peace? What would you do if your family abandoned you on your most important day, only to return when they realized what they'd lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you've built your own chosen families and found strength in difficult moments. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more stories about resilience, redemption, and the families we choose. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're worthy of being chosen, that their value doesn't depend on anyone else's ability to see it. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you always remember that you deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated, and that sometimes the best families are the ones we build ourselves, one choice at a time. With love and gratitude, Kathleen.